Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai all the Vaishnava Acharyas. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, so life after the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Life after the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada. Krishna. When issues came up of whatever it was, financial decisions to be made, devotee or disciple conflicts to be resolved, practical action of what to do when certain situations came up that were like the police were stopping Sankirtan in Australia, or the people in France were throwing garbage at devotees when they went out on Sankirtan. What to do about these things? That was then. You go to Prabhupada. Prabhupada would say, oh, do like this, do like that, and resolve the issue. Or this one, he's not good for president, make this other one the president and send this other one to be a cook somewhere. He could make practical decisions. You could go to him. You could write a letter. And he would say when specific situations arose. After his disappearance, oh boy, how to deal with everything without him physically being present, saying that. So what happens is the different disciples, they try to consult Prabhupada's writings, his teachings, what they heard, what they remembered he said about a similar situation. And then they argue. Because Prabhupada was very much in the present moment in Krishna. And Krishna was guiding him what to say, what to do in the situations. But the situations are never exactly the same. And so sometimes something would come up, and Prabhupada would say and do one thing, and he'd tell others to say and do. And a similar situation would come up, and he would say and do something completely different. So the disciples, because they're not actually being guided by Krishna directly, which is what Prabhupada wants, but not exactly there yet. They try to go back and find similar instructions that he gave at different times and places. And because he gave different instructions at different times and places, there's conflict. One devotee, because they also feel a certain way, and then they find a quote that Prabhupada gave that supports what they want, and they take that and somebody else finds another quote or another instruction of what they want, which is different regarding a particular circumstance, and then they argue and nobody knows what to do. Krishna. So this is a little interesting account here of, because now there's a big issue with this vaccination and this virus, and somebody has a quote where Prabhupada says it's okay to take, and he compares it to something good. And then another time he says, no, I don't want. So they argue what to do. Because the disciples, they haven't reached the level yet where Krishna is actually guiding them in the present moment how to deal appropriately with time, place, and circumstance decisions. In other words, if you'll pardon me, they don't have any common sense. They don't have any common sense what to do. So anyway, Hare Krishna. This is a conversation between Srila Prabhupada and Hayagriva. And it deals with, because I'm hearing a lot of devotees very adamant, don't take the vaccine, blah, 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 this problem, that problem, and it's a government plot, you'll be emanating nanoparticles, and then I get hit with all these quotes from, I don't know who these people are that they're quoting. It's all like conspiracy stuff, And then the government comes out with, oh, everything is roses and everything's just fine, so pick your poison, right? So this is the other side of the coin with Prabhupada and the issue of vaccines and flu. So some devotees take this side. So this is the conversation. This took place early on because it's with Hayagriva. So Srila Prabhupada, infected or disinfected? In the material world, we're all infected. This is the disinfecting process. Simply remembering Krishna. Yasmarat Pundarikaksham. What is it at initiation? One who's purified or unpurified. If they remember the lotus-eyed Lord, then go back to God. So purified or unpurified, one who remembers the Lord. See, this is powerful spiritual stuff. But I was just reading in Bhagavad Gita how Krishna says in chapter 12, verse 3 or 4, right around there somewhere, that the goal of it, he says it in several places, is to simply remember him, to simply think of him all the time. But because people can't do that, and conditioning is, especially in Kali Yuga, it's so strong. So Srila Prabhupada, he came to give the next step, which Krishna describes, is to practice. And rising early in the morning, chanting prescribed number of rounds, following regular principles, worshiping the deity, making offerings of food, picking flowers, and then, like this, to actually practice serving personal form of Krishna Archamurti. Pancharatrika Vidhi, as Narada Muni also, Pancharatrika. So to give two, simply remember Krishna, and then also to practice. If you can't fully absorb in remembering Krishna all the time in ecstasy, then to practice. So Prabhupada gave that. He gave that practice. And at some point to come to the level of being fully absorbed to develop love of God. By serving, we develop love. Actually, I experienced that with my father. I was a bit distant from him for many, many years because I was living in ashrams, wearing saris. He couldn't relate to it, but he never discouraged me. He always was there for me as my father, wishing me well, which is a lot to his credit. But toward the end of his life, he needed help. He became in his 90s. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't do anything very much. So I began to see for his care, and so I was serving my father like that in a practical way. And he was writing poems, and his poems were very beautiful. They're actually kind of devotional. And I was putting them in little books, little booklets, and he liked to hand them out to people. He would sign them and hand his poetry out. He loved to do that. So it was a way to get to know him through his writing, So I was serving him, and then my love for him increased. I think that's also understood how that happens in the Vedic system of marriage, that by serving each other, it's not like they fall in love romantically. That's a real passionate program. It's more like Kshatriya, but at least when the system was up and running a little better, the marriages were arranged by the astrologer, and the charts and the family heritages were compared, and if they were compatible, the boy and the girl, the marriage was sanctioned by both families, and she would begin to serve her new husband, and in this way she would develop love and attachment for him. And he also for her, his companion, his support. Behind every great man there's a great woman. So it worked like that. By serving, the love develops, by serving. So approaching the deity and the spiritual master, it's like that. By serving, then the love develops. So Prabhupada gave that path, the path of practicing service, of marrying his disciples to Krishna so they could serve and develop this love. So simply remembering Krishna is the disinfecting process. This initiation, the Prabhupada gives, is to teach how to always remember Vishnu and Krishna by service, and hearing and chanting. As soon as we hear this Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we immediately remember Krishna. His speech in the Bhagavad Gita, his form, his name, his qualities, his pastimes, everything comes. So we have to practice that. Then we remain always uncontaminated. And if you forget Krishna, then there is a chance of, just like in medical science, if there's some epidemic, here's where the vaccine thing comes in, a disease, they give some vaccination. I think in Los Angeles you gave me vaccination. What was that? The flu? Hayagriva. The Hong Kong flu. Srila Prabhupada. Ah, Hong Kong flu. Yes. So everyone took that vaccination. Our Hayagriva took me also. Ah, let us have. So there was no attack. Fortunately, there was no attack. Similarly, this world is Hong Kong flu. Maya is always ready to attack, always. So we have to take this injection, this anti-vaccine. Hare Krishna. Ineche asadimaya nasibara lagi. And that's from the song, I believe Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song, which translates, I have brought the medicine to eradicate the disease of illusion. Now pray for this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and take it. He quotes another song, Jeev Jago, I have brought this medicine for killing this Hong Kong flu of Maya. Eniche adisi asadi Maya nasibara lagi. Harinama Maha Mantra. Now you take. This is the present contribution, the greatest contribution of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to fight against this attack of material influence. And then Prabhupada goes on more and more quoting different verses to elaborate more and more on this idea of the Maha Mantra being like a vaccination. And Prabhupada says you would take it for a disease, you take the vaccination and then you don't get the disease. So some devotees take shelter of that instruction. Then later on, there was some traveling going on and Prabhupada didn't want to take a vaccination. And he had someone else, I think it was Brahmananda, take the shot for him. So devotees point to that. See? But that doesn't make sense to me. Why would Prabhupada have a beloved disciple? He loved Brahmananda and his brother both. Very dear disciples two brothers, that did so much personal service for Prabhupada, so many austerities for Prabhupada to try and help him in his mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. Why would he have him injected with something that would hurt him? No, there was something else going on there. Something else. Sometimes a person who's weak physically or has some disease may not want to take a vaccination because their body's already compromised. That may have been what was the story with Prabhupada. He was elderly, he had ongoing problems with diabetes, and there were some kidney problems also, and he may have decided that he was in the, I'm trying to understand this, in that it wouldn't be a good idea. His physical was too compromised, that the risks were not, because of his compromised condition, that it was better not to do that. But that's only because he was in a physically compromised situation. Because we have both things. So the other side takes that. Oh, it's a terrible thing, and then they argue. Because they can't consult directly with Prabhupada. And if he were physically present, and they go, Prabhupada, should we take, what is this COVID? Should we take the, should we not take, what should we do? They can't go directly. So they look for some similar situation in the past. There's two and they're conflicting. What to do? Because not at the level of actually being guided by Supersoul and Krishna, personally guided. So that's just one one thing that's really in your face right now. And whatever decision someone makes, we respect that. I mean, I respect it. Somebody decides to go on the, oh, vaccine is terrible, because Prabhupada said, and somebody else goes on the side of, oh no, vaccine is fine because Prabhupada said. Whatever decision someone makes, that's their personal decision, and you know, they just take responsibility for their decision and learn something. About surrendering to Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So that's just one thing, the vaccine thing. And that won't be here much longer. It'll unwind. But then there's other things, like practically everything. On the one hand, Prabhupada said this, and then on the other hand, he said that. And then they argued. All kinds of issues for management, for initiations, for, oh my God. It goes on and on and on and on. It's been 50 years. The minute Prabhupada disappeared, and even before he disappeared, it was all brewing. And then when he disappeared, so I've been looking at some of these videos by senior disciples where they discuss the years right after Prabhupada disappeared and the difficulties and the challenges and the problems and that were going on. And yeah, I mean, you know, I lived through that. I know exactly what they're talking about. Firsthand. Woohoo! Krishna. Yeah. These are management issues, and it's always difficult. Management is always difficult. Prabhupada said, management's always a headache. And I see on the one hand, without Srila Prabhupada being personally present, or an acharya of his stature being personally present to guide the movement, the tendency is, on the one hand, to try to have some absolute authority, like a power grab. And it was really obvious right after he left. He named 11 senior disciples. By pointing them out, they became intoxicated with, now we're as good as Prabhupada. He gave us, magically, the power to just tell everybody else what to do. We're the supreme authorities. And that was a mess, because they weren't pure devotees. They're just intoxicated, for the most part. And it was like, all these demons were let loose on Prabhupada's other disciples. And there was a mass exodus. Because of that atmosphere of control. So that didn't last very long. It lasted too long, well up into the 80s, and it became obvious what a disaster it was as these different supreme authorities were falling down into illicit sex, stealing money, having really crazy preaching things, So some changes were made by the governing body commission, which had its own problems. For one thing, many of these supreme authorities were also GBCs, so it was very unbalanced. And it was interesting that devotees that were talking about this in the video, that it was the era of absolute authority, like dictatorship, which didn't work because, I mean, if you have a pious king, that's something else. But it's Kali Yuga, and these people had only been chanting Hare Krishna for 7 or 8 years. So, yeah, Hare Krishna. So what does Prabhupada want? That's still the question. It's still the question. It's still going on. So it became more of a collaboration than a supreme authority. But the tendency is still to try to control things by rules, regulations. So there's committees, and they meet, and they discuss, and it's not the era of supreme authority of the sannyasis were the supreme authorities because of their austerities, which many of them couldn't maintain. and the gurus, same similar problem. So it's more like Prabhupada had set up a GBC. Why did he set up a GBC? So there could be collaboration. So there could be the sages at Naimisharanya, what to do in certain situations. The elders, the committee of elders, which now that they're getting a little bit older, they're kind of sort of like the committee of elders, I guess. I don't have much to do with the GBC. But the devotees that I saw that were talking, they looked a little more reasonable, like you could actually approach them if you had a problem without getting, smashed. Looks like, maybe a little more reasonable. What they can actually do about anything, that's questionable. But just make more rules and regulations. Okay. So there's that side. And it's still kind of out there on the extreme. Still. It's getting better. It takes a while. It's a new movement. And then on the other side is no rules, no regulations, just spontaneous, just immediately go to transcendental, loving relationship with the Lord. That's the next stage. Forget all of that. But not as a society or a movement. That you don't just jump there. That's why Prabhupada gave the practice. It's not like the practice was only valid while he was personally present. No, it's valid now. It will be valid for a long, long time. Because it's the gradual process. People need to do the gradual process. Not everyone's going to just jump to ecstatic devotional service. It's really unreasonable to expect. It's unreasonable. It really is. So I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand how it's all put together, because Hare Krishna, I mean, I just go with what Prabhupada said. They can argue over the details. This is what I go with. Yasmaret Pundari Kaksha. Simply remembering Krishna. So they're arguing over all these different things. And it's for Krishna. Okay, great. But there's something else. It's with Krishna. There's for Krishna, And that's good. But there's with Krishna and in Krishna. That's better. So that's my focus, is in Krishna, with Krishna. All these other issues, they're kind of like out there for Krishna. All these different personalities with their different understandings and perspectives and ideas and quotes, and it's all for Krishna. But I go with this. This is the disinfecting process, simply remembering Krishna. There's a verse in the Upadeshamrita, I think it's number 4, where Rupa Goswami discusses how these extremes, extreme on one end, rules and regulations, extreme on the other end, anything goes, just remember Krishna. That's an extreme also. Where he describes, if I can find it, I'm looking. Krishna, number 4. No. Number 3. No. Oh, I'm in the wrong book. Okay, the nectar, instruction, and journey. Oh, come on. Where is it? I know it's here. Krishna. Hey, oh, there it is. Okay. Ta-da. Like, why did Prabhupada give us this? Right? It's, where is it? Hey, Krishna, I never find it when I want it. No, it's not the later. There's only 11 verses in this. Krishna. Oh yeah, okay, it is. It's text 2. Atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha jana sangascha loyam cham cha sadbir bhaktir vinasyate. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. Eating more than necessary, collecting more funds than required, over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, being greedy for mundane achievements. So that's number 4, practicing scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. So that goes on that extreme of, we're going to control the situation with more rules and regulations just for the sake of controlling the situation. And that spoils the devotional atmosphere. But on the other hand, rejecting rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. That also spoils the devotional atmosphere. You gotta stay in the middle of the road. It's all about control issues. This is all of these, you can see in them how they're influenced by the modes of material nature. Eating more than necessary, passionate. Collecting more funds than required, mode of passion. Over-endeavoring for mundane things, mode of passion. Talking unnecessarily, mundane subject matters. So it's all the mode of passion. Associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. Greedy for mundane achievements. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. So without Prabhupada's personal presence to guide the disciples, and without them being on a platform of actual devotion, actually worshiping the Lord in the pure spirit of devotion, pure love, then it's a very difficult situation. It either goes one way or the other. It either goes control everything by rules and regulations, or because it still remains a control issue, and then or abandon rules and regulations and just go off and do whatever it is you're going to do. So we saw that to one degree or another when Prabhupada disappeared. It either went that way, supreme power, authority, and we say what we do, or no, I'm leaving, I'm going to go off and do whatever, I can to do. Not necessarily acting whimsically, but kind of, sort of. So the whole society was really jeopardized at that point. And then Prabhupada's godbrothers, seeing the situation, they came in to see if there were some devotees there, instead of going off into the Neverlands and just falling back down into intoxication and illicit sex and all of those lovely things. If they couldn't offer, take shelter here, I'll help you. So, but in that way, the society was a mass exodus, and it was a mess. And that went on for a long time. I stayed as long as I could. I stayed as close as I could, as long as I could, and but the environment was really, really rough for Prabhupada's disciples. It was rough. You had people spitting in your face, the disciples of the new authorities. You had them spitting in your face. It was really rough, telling you what a failure you were because you didn't become a pure devotee and a guru like your godbrother did. Oh, it was horrible. It was really horrible. I mean, oh God, the atmosphere was just disgusting. It was really nasty. Oh God, I think about it. So, I finally just sort of disappeared and did what I could. I mean, I always tried to stay engaged. Traveled around in a van, distributed books, tried a few little preaching programs here and there, but I wasn't very strong, and I didn't have much practice speaking. Now I can't shut up, but I didn't have much practice speaking, and so when I would invite people over for kirtan and prasadam, I couldn't actually give a class or anything because I didn't have any. I'd never done that in the temple. Women could never speak in the temple. Oh my God! And so I had that I couldn't speak. So it would only go so far. But there's never any loss, it's always whatever's done. Krishna says in the Gita, whatever, advancement one makes is never lost. Whatever's done in devotional service is never lost. So it's always whoever attended those, they got something for sure. So there's no loss. So hearing these tapes, I've posted some of them, of these senior disciples now, sharing their experiences in the good old days, right after Prabhupada left. It's pretty, it's encouraging, but there's a lot more to go, because it's not just rules, it's maturity. But how can you expect maturity out of, at 1977, the devotees at best were late 20s, maybe early 30s. How can you expect maturity out of people like that? Just the hormonal rage that was going through their bodies. How can you expect them to be, think clearly and maturely? Sannyas is taken at age 75, traditionally. And here they were, 25 years old sannyasis. I mean, really? Prabhupada apologized before he left. He said, he knew he'd done so many things that were really outrageous. He knew he was wild. He apologized. He said, I made too many unqualified disciples, which means sannyasis, too many unqualified. He said, what could I do? It was an emergency. It was an emergency. I had to. It was an emergency. So it appears things are holding together at least long enough for at least the first generation to mature. And also he said, it'll take at least 3 generations to approach the deity properly. So we're seeing 2 and 3 generations now. So, yes, we can say Prabhupada mission is successful. Where Bhaktisiddhanta, he had never seen that. There's one paper he wrote. I don't know if I can find it, where he says it's never been successful. A spiritual organization has never been successful, and he doesn't see that it could be. So we're seeing Prabhupada's organization something extraordinary. It's not that Bhaktisiddhanta wouldn't want to see it, but he just, let's see, ISKCON Desire Tree? No, wait, is it here? Hare Krishna. I can never find anything when I want to. Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. No. Alright, try this. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh. Let me save it so I don't have to go through this next time. Alright. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I think it's called Radical Krishna Consciousness. Radical Krishna Consciousness. Well, he had a lot of writings. Radical Krishna Consciousness. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Ah, there it is. Radical Krishna Consciousness. It's not very long. Well, 2 or 3 pages. I love the way he writes. It's called Organized Religion. Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskitadi Satarani Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Iti Namane. Organized religion. Krishna manifests his eternal birth, the pure cognitive essence of the serving soul, who is located above mundane limitations. King Kamsa is the typical aggressive empiricist, ever on the lookout for the appearance of the truth, for the purpose of suppressing him before he has time to develop. There is no exaggeration of the real connotation of the consistent empiric position. The materialist has a natural repugnance for the transcendent. He is disposed to link that faith in the incomprehensible, in the parent of dogmatism and hypocrisy in the guise of religion. So what happens when the materialist gets wind of Krishna appearing, then the materialist has a natural repugnance for the transcendent, and he's disposed to link that faith in the incomprehensible, to put it into the structure of dogmatism and hypocrisy and call it religion. He is also equally, this materialist, under the delusion that there is no real dividing line between the material and the spiritual. Can't tell the difference between spirit and matter. He is strengthened in his delusion by the interpretation of scriptures by persons who are like-minded like himself. This includes all the lexicographic interpreters. So lexicographic means language. I had to look that up many times. The lexicographical interpretation is upheld by Kamsa as the real scientific explanation of the scriptures. In other words, the literal, what it's saying literally. In other words, there's nothing transcendental or mystical or spiritual about any of their approach to the truth. So the truth is understood in spirit and truth. So they're getting rid of the spirit part and just the truth in this dogmatic setting. The lexicographical interpretation, words, how they interpret it, is upheld by Kamsa as the real scientific explanation of the scriptures and is perfectly in keeping with his dread of and aversion for the transcendental. These lexicographical interpreters are employed by Kamsa in putting down the first suspected appearance of genuine faith in the transcendental. King Kamsa knows very well that if the faith in the transcendental is once allowed to grow, it is sure to upset all his empiric prospects. Krishna. Jai. There is historical ground for such misgivings. Accordingly, if the empiric domination is to be preserved intact, it would be necessary not to lose a moment to put down the transcendental heresy the instant it threatens to make its appearance in earnest. Hare Krishna. King Kamsa, acting on this traditional fear, is never slow to take the scientific precaution of deputing empiric teachers of the scriptures. Backed by the resources of dictionary and grammar and all empiric subtleties, to put down by the show of specious arguments based on hypothetical principles the true interpretation of the eternal religion revealed by the scriptures. So using the scriptures to destroy what the scriptures are meant to bring forth. In other words, by all the Vedas, I am to be known, Krishna says. So they use the Vedas with word jugglery and quotes and everything to block Krishna, to stand between those trying to approach transcendence. And cloud cover Krishna. Kamsa is strongly persuaded that faith in the transcendental can be effectively put down by empiricism. In other words, this will work if prompt and decisive measures are adopted at the very outset, when Krishna is just a baby. He attributes the failure of atheism in the past to the neglect of the adoption of such measures before the theistic fallacy had time to spread among the fanatical masses. In other words, it didn't act quick enough. That's why atheism couldn't stop people from still somehow or other approaching transcendence, because it didn't act quick enough. But Kamsa is found to count without his host, which I remember looking that up and I can't remember what it means. Count without his host. This is very literary use of English. It's very beautiful. It's almost like Shakespearean soliloquy or something. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense, where that came from. It's kind of an old common saying, to count without his host. In other words, it comes from, I just looked it up, let's see, it says, originally used to describe one who did not consult one's host, such as an innkeeper, when calculating his lodging expenses. To calculate one's bill without the landlord or the host. Or in other words, to come to false conclusions. And you didn't realize how expensive it was going to be because you didn't check with, your innkeeper how much the bill was going to be. You didn't, So Kamsa is found to count without his host. He doesn't realize that he hasn't checked with what the cost of this is going to be. When Kamsa is born, he is found to be able to upset all sinister designs against those who are apprised by him of his advent, apprised by himself of his advent. When Krishna is born, not Kamsa, Krishna. Okay, K's are throwing me here. When Krishna is born, he is found to be able to upset all sinister designs against those who are apprised by himself of his advent. So what does apprised mean? Inform. Apprise. Inform. When Krishna is born, he is found to be able to upset all sinister designs against those who are apprised by himself of his advent. So informed of his advent. He is able to upset all the sinister stuff. The apparently causeless faith displayed by persons, irrespective of age, sex, and condition, may confound all rabid empiricists who are, on principle, adverse to the absolute truth, whose appearance is utterly incompatible with the domination of empiricism. Now, it sounds like I'm talking about them out there, the demons. But actually, Bhaktisiddhanta here is talking about what goes on within religion. He's not talking about, just the out-and-out atheist, whatever, out there. He's talking about what goes on within a religious structure. Kamsa comes to try to subvert the whole thing. Why? The basic problem is they don't actually understand the difference between spirit and matter. In positions of authority and guidance, and they don't understand the difference between spirit and matter. They actually have aversion to when that comes, when Krishna appears. The Supreme Personality of Godhead actually have aversion. But no adverse efforts of the empiricists, whose rule seems, till then, to be perfectly well established over the minds of the deluded souls of this world, can dissuade any person from exclusively in following the truth when he actually manifests his birth in the pure cognitive essence of the soul, when he becomes conscious of Krishna. Putana is the slayer of all infants. The baby, when he or she comes out of the mother's womb, falls at once into the hands of the pseudo-teachers of religion. These teachers are successful in forestalling the attempts of the good preceptor, whose help is never sought by the atheists of this world at the baptisms of their babies. This is ensured by the arrangements of all established churches of the world. They have been successful only in supplying watchful putanas for effecting the spiritual destruction of persons from the moment of their birth with the cooperation of their worldly parents. No human contrivance can prevent these putanas from obtaining possession of the pulpits. This is due to the general prevalence of atheistic disposition in the people of the world. This is very strong language. He's saying all the established churches, the people speaking from their pulpits, are actually atheists. They're actually Kamsas. This is very strong language. This is ensured by the arrangements of all established churches of the world. They have been successful only in supplying watchful putanas for effecting the spiritual destruction of persons from the moment of their birth with the cooperation of their worldly parents. The church that has the best chance of survival in this damned world is that of atheism, under the convenient guise of theism. The churches have always proved the staunchest upholders of the grossest form of worldliness, from which even the worst of non-ecclesiastical criminals are found to recoil. It's painting a pretty dark picture of organized religion. It is not from any deliberate opposition to the ordained clergy that these observations are made. The original purpose of the established churches of the world may not always be objectionable, but no stable religious arrangement for instructing the masses has yet been successful. The original purpose of the established churches of the world may not always be objectionable, but no stable religious arrangement for instructing the masses has yet been successful. The Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in pursuance of the teachings of the scriptures, enjoined all absence of conventionalism for the teachers of the eternal religion. Conventionalism is out. The Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in pursuance of the teachings of the scriptures, enjoins all absence of conventionalism for the teachers of the eternal religion. It does not follow that the mechanical adoption of unconventional life by any person will make him a fit teacher of religion. Regulation is necessary for controlling the inherent worldliness of conditioned souls. So that goes back to Nectar of Instruction, part 2, text 2, part 4, that too many rules and regulations on one side, that's the conventionalism, has no place in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, and any person who does not follow, but it doesn't follow that following unconventional life makes him fit to be a teacher of religion. He says, religion is necessary, regulation is necessary for controlling the inherent worldliness of conditioned souls. It's not like there's no regulation. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is not bound by tradition and conventionalism. But no mechanical regulation has any value, even for such a purpose, being controlling the inherent worldliness of conditioned souls. The inherent worldliness of conditioned souls is mechanically has no value for doing that. The bona fide teacher of religion is neither any product of, nor the favorer of, any mechanical system. In his hands, no system has likewise the chance of degenerating into a lifeless arrangement. The mere pursuit of fixed doctrines and fixed liturgies cannot hold a person to the true spirit of doctrine and liturgy. The idea of an organized church in an intelligible form indeed marks the close of the living spiritual movement. The idea of an organized church in an intelligible form indeed marks the close of the living spiritual movement. The great ecclesiastical establishments are the dikes and dams to retain the current that cannot be held by any such contrivances. They indeed indicate a desire on the part of the masses to exploit a spiritual movement for their own purpose. They also unmistakably indicate the end of the absolute and unconventional guidance of the bona fide spiritual teacher. The people of this world understand preventative systems. They have no idea at all of the unprevented positive eternal life. Preventive systems. Yeah. Having to control against this and against that, and prevention, but they have no idea of the positive eternal life. In other words, they got all the negatives, but they don't got the positive. Dealing with all the negatives, prevention, but they don't have the positive. Neither can there be any earthly contrivance for the permanent preservation of the life eternal on this mundane plane on the popular scale. It's not material, folks. Those are therefore greatly mistaken who are disposed to look forward to the amelioration of the worldly state in any worldly sense from the worldly success of any really spiritual movement. Amelioration of the worldly state. It's not a material process that's going to bring about the spiritual solution. It's not by any mechanical material means that the spiritual, the goal will be. It is these worldly expectants who become the patrons of the mischievous race of the pseudo-teachers of religion. Yeah. Hare Krishna. The Putanas, whose congenial function is to stifle the theistic disposition at the very moment of its suspected appearance. But the real theistic disposition can never be stifled by the efforts of those Putanas. The Putanas have power over only the atheist. It is a thankless but salutary task that they perform for the benefit of their unwilling victims. So, cheaters and the cheated. The cheaters only have power over the cheated. The atheists, the Putanas only have power of those who don't believe in, have any attraction or desire for the spiritual anyway. But as soon as theistic disposition proper makes its appearance in the pure cognitive essence of the awakened soul, consciousness, the Putanas are decisively silenced at the very earliest stage of their encounter with newborn Krishna. The would-be slayer is herself slain. This is the reward of the negative services that the Putanas unwittingly render to the cause of theism by strangling all hypocritical demonstrations against their own hypocrisy. Hare Krishna. Hypocrisy. What is he saying here? Getting killed by Krishna. Okay, in simple language. In the Bhaktisiddhanta, the reward of the negative services that the Putanas unwittingly render to the cause of theism by strangling all hypocritical demonstrations against their own hypocrisy. So she's appeared as mother, but she was poisoning. So, anyway. But Putana does not at all like to receive her reward in only form which involves the total destruction of her wrong personality. King Kamsa also does not like to lose the services of the most trusted of his agents. The effective silencing of the whole race of pseudo-teachers of religion is the first clear indication of the appearance of the Absolute on the mundane plane. The bona fide teacher of the Absolute heralds the advent of Krishna by his uncompromising campaign against the pseudo-teachers of religion. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay. All right. Hare Krishna. I think your battery is running down. It's a very unenthusiastic Coco. Jai. Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya. Spirit and truth. Then the truth is not diverted. Spirit. And Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita, what is it? 1866. 1866. Krishna. Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda. 18. Oh no. Well, that's a nice one too. But what's the one about that's abandon all varieties of religion to surrender to me? I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions, do not fear. Okay. Abandon all varieties of religion. Abandon all varieties of religion. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Yeah. So what is Prabhupada's movement? Is it a successful spiritual organization? Bhaktisiddhanta says it's never been possible before. Organized religion is all. Is it an organized religion? ISKCON? Is it organized religion? Or is it actually a spiritual movement? And where are the safeguards to protect against King Kamsa and his cohorts taking over? And he said, in the name of Scripture, the atheists preach from the pulpits. And what is their problem? They can't tell the difference. They haven't reached the first base. Can't tell the difference between spirit and matter. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. It's quite a movement. Krishna Chaitanya, Krishna Chaitanya. It's young. It's only 50 years since Prabhupada disappeared. And this maturity, we'll get some level of maturity and realization to come in. And see if this little infant ISKCON can thwart Kamsa's attacks, the Putanas and the Kamsas. They can be thwarted. under the guidance of the founder Acharya. Because in his hands, a mechanical system isn't mechanical. It works. It's only when those who have other motives than actual transcendence and actual love of God in spirit and truth take the reins and begin to control things and preach, then it's a problem. Then the mechanical system becomes mundane. Hare Krishna. It's interesting, very interesting. Ah, Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. All right, let's see what today has in store. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi